In this tutorial, we're going to be modeling this remote here, and we're going to focus mainly on using the bevel modifier and custom attribute edges so that we can define bevels of various widths and model this in a non-destructive manner. So let's go ahead and delete everything in our scene and go ahead and pull in our reference images, which can be found in the resources section of my Discord server. So we're just going to go Alt-R to reset the rotation, R-X and 90. And then G, Y, and 7 to just push it back. 7's completely arbitrary. I'm just doing that so that we have an environment to work on the 3D model. It's going to come over to the properties of our model, of our reference image here, and we're going to set the depth to back and the side to front. That way it just culls out the back and we can see it at the front. We'll go ahead and change our transform pivot point to the 3D cursor. Go Shift D, R, Z, and 90 to rotate it 90 degrees around the center. Just press this little 2 here so that we're not replacing the duplicate instance image. And we'll get our side image in, and then do the same thing, Shift D, R, Z, and 90. Press the 2, and we can get our back image. So we can block out the general shape of this very, very easily. So we'll just go ahead and bring in a cube. And I'm just going to go S and X to scale on the X-axis. And I'm just going to line it up on the left-hand side of the image. So about there looks right. And then S and Z to scale it. I'm looking at the top part of the image here, just to make it roughly fit. Go to the side view, and S and Y to get the width. And once again, I'm looking at the left-hand side. And we can adjust the rest of it once we get into edit mode. So before going into edit mode, I just want you to press N to bring up the N panel. And you'll notice our scale has been adjusted here because we just did scaling. So just press Ctrl A and apply the scale, and everything goes back to 1. It's just going to make sure we don't distort the bevels that we're about to do. Speaking of, just going to go into edit mode very quickly, and I'm just going to slightly adjust these positions. Don't worry about this side view where the top is. They don't align properly, so I'm just going to use the front view for where the top and bottom should be because it's going to be more reliable. Cool, so that should be okay for us now. Now, what we want to do is, there's a lot of bevels to work with here, which can be pretty hard to keep track of. So we're going to use the bevel modifier and attributes to make all of this a lot easier. So let's go ahead, select these 4 outer edges, press N again to bring up our N panel, and under the edges data here, we want to bring our mean bevel weight up to 1 for these. With that, we can go ahead and add in a bevel modifier. Oops, can't spell. And we want to set the segments up to 4, and then change our limit method to weight. And I'm just going to go onto front view here, go into wireframe view, and once again, looking at the upper leftmost edge, I'm just going to adjust our amount until it matches the profile, which looks fine there. Cool, so there's also more bevels on it, so if we just get a little bit closer to the reference image here, there's also a bevel on the front edge. There's these inner bevels in here, and then on the side, there's a big bevel at the back of the model, and then there's bevels on the side here. So it's a lot to manage, and it looks like an absolute headache to work with, but I'm going to show you a very easy way to make all this much, much more manageable. So let's start out with cutting in this detail to the front here. So I'm just going to cut a vertical loop, and I'm just going to push this over on the X just to match the outside here. So when I say the outside, there's a curve that runs on the outside here, which is where I've roughly matched that in, and then there's another one that's on the inside. So I want to line everything up with the outside, because then as we bevel, it will sort of all push inwards on itself, and it will fill the shape for us. Okay, Control R again, I'm going to add these horizontal loops, so just bring that up roughly to the outside edge there. And then Control R again and bring this to the outside edge at the bottom. And then we just need one more loop on the side. Control R to add a vertical one. And just bring this out to there to match the outside loop there. And I might just adjust these just a touch to match the side profile, because I think these ones might just be a little bit more reliable for this bit of detail. Cool, so with that, let's just go ahead and select these 2 faces that we've segmented off. And I'm just going to press I to do an inset. And I'm just going to bring it in so that the edges match with the inside edges. Not worried about the curve at the moment. The bevel will sort that out, but just the top and, the horizontal and vertical edge. So about there, I think looks all right. And so with that, let's go back to edge select mode and let's select these 4 edges along here, like so. And what we're going to do is we could technically assign, different bevel weights here to make it all work. I don't like that just because it means we need to be more conscious of the weight that we're using. So instead I'm going to use attributes. I think it just makes it all a little bit more manageable with having independent bevel weights as opposed to them all working together. A bit convoluted, but I think this way is just going to make things a little bit easier for us. So if we just go to our data panel here and under attributes, I'm just going to go ahead and add a new attribute and we can call this bevel underscore inner. And we want to change the domain type from vertex to edge, and we'll keep the data type as a float as we want it to be a number. So with that done, if we go to mesh and set attribute, see we're setting the attribute for bevel inner here, and we're just going to change this to 1, hit enter. And now we have a bevel attribute on these. So if we just go back to our modifiers, I'm just going to collapse this one. We can go ahead and duplicate this one. And I'm going to call this bevel underscore inner. And while I'm at it, I might just change this one to bevel underscore edge, just so I've got a bit of management. And let's change the edge weight from bevel weight edge to bevel inner. And at the moment, you're not going to be able to see anything, but if we just tab back, press Z to get into our wireframe view, we can see how it's affecting the wireframe here. And I'm just going to change the amount a bit, just until it matches up roughly with the curve shape. So somewhere around there. Oops, pressing all the wrong buttons. There we go. And I might... No, I'll just leave it. I know it's not matching up perfectly there, but I think I'll just leave it. It's not going to be drastic. Cool. So once you've got a bevel shape that you're happy with, what I'm going to say is we go ahead and apply the bevel inner. And so now we've got that baked into our mesh. The next thing I want us to do is we've got these 4 edges here, these sort of pseudo support loops that have been created. So go ahead and dissolve these. I know that that's gone ahead and made a big nasty Ngon on our model, but we will clean all that up in due time. It's just going to make some of the other bevels that we're about to throw in a little bit easier to work with. So using the same principles, let's just go ahead and I'm just going to select all these back faces here, edges here. And we'll do the same thing. We'll come to our data panel, add a new attribute, and we can call this one back bevel. And once again, we want the domain to be on an edge and a float type. And if we go mesh, set attribute, see we're setting it for back bevel, and we'll also want to set this one to 1. Go to our modifiers, we can duplicate this bevel edge, call this bevel back, and we'll just set the edge weight to bevel or back bevel. Cool. And so if we look at the reference image here, we can see that the bevel on the back's a little bit wider. So I'm just going to bring this amount down a bit because I think it's probably a bit too much at the moment. Probably just go somewhere around there. I think that looks nice. Fairly large bevel there. And similarly, let's go ahead, select these edges on the front. Like so. And we'll repeat the same thing. We'll go add in a new attribute, go front bevel, domain, edge, float, add, mesh, set attribute, setting the attribute for the front bevel, and we'll go factor of 1. And we can just duplicate the bevel back here, go front underscore bevel, and change this to front bevel. And the bevel on the front isn't anywhere near as big as the one on the back, but I think, just with the way we've got our topology set up, I think it will pretty much do the correct bevel size, just completely out of coincidence, just because we have the clamp overlap. So if we turn this off, you'd see it starts causing some errors. I'm just going to leave it on because the front bevel should be smaller, and I think that's actually a pretty good size for it to be at compared to the back. Cool. Alright, so let's go ahead and model in this little detail at the front here. So I'm just going to add a loop cut into this middle set of faces and just push it into the center, just so it's barely not touching our inner loop. I'm going to use Alt and S and then press S to turn even thickness on. And just holding down shift, I'm just going to push this in just to create a little bit of depth there. So it's just a small amount, doesn't need to be anything drastic. So that's looking nice. And then just preemptively, I'm just going to go ahead and add a support loop to the inside of this little bit of detail here. So I'm just going to press I and just drag these down to create a support loop. And just one thing, I should have mentioned this earlier possibly, I don't think it would have made an effect, but I'm just going to select edge rail. It doesn't seem to actually be doing anything in this instance, but sometimes insets, especially around corners, can have a little bit of a habit of skewing a bit. So I'm just going to press edge rail here. It doesn't look like it's actually doing anything, but just to be safe in case anything sort of screws up on your end. And I can see something here, so there's a bit of a problem here. Something's going very wrong. For some reason, when we do the inset, it doesn't carry the attribute across. So I'm just going to select these two new edges that have been brought in here, go to the data panel, make sure the front bevel attribute is selected here, that's important. We'll go to our mesh, set attribute, and you can see for these two edges, it's an attribute of 0, and that's why this error is happening. So we'll just bring that up to 1. And now that looks all nice. Cool, all right. So I'm actually re-evaluating this bevel here on the front. I think it's a little bit too tight for my liking. So I'm just going to go ahead and select these two edges along here. I'm just going to double tap G to do an edge slide. And I'm just going to bring them back a bit. And you'll see as we're bringing it back, we're influencing the size of the bevel at the front. So if I just do this edge slide a bit further back, you can see that that's changing. So I'm just going to bring it back to about there. I think that looks a little bit nicer now. Cool. All right. So if we were to go ahead and shade this smooth and bring in the subdivision surface modifier, you'll notice that things don't look fantastic. There's a whole lot of problems, and that's because we have Ngons everywhere at the moment, so the subdivision's not going to resolve nicely. So I'm going to turn that off for a second. So let's go about resolving these. So to start out, I just want to clean up some of the positions of where these edges around the back and top of the model are going. So I'm just going to select this back loop here. I'll change my pivot point back to the bounding box just to make it easier to see where my axis arrows are. Under the snapping tools here, though, I want to change the snap target to vertex and the snap base to active. And then with those edges selected, I'm just going to go G, hold down Control. G, Z, then hold down Control, and just snap these down to be level with that. And then same thing here. By the way, I'm just holding down Control to select these here. It just selects the shortest path between your first and next selection. Select those around the sides, go G, Y, hold down Control, and snap that to that vertex there. And then same thing here, just select around here, G, Z, Control, snap to that vert. And then I'll do the same for this one that's running down the middle at the moment. Let's go G, X, hold down Control, and put that there. Cool. So next thing I want to do is we're going to want to put a support loop around this edge here. So what we could do an inset, but I don't really want to use the inset because I kind of feel like it might skew things a little bit much, even with the edge rail. So instead I'm just going to use Control R, make a cut through here, and you'll notice it terminates at the Ngons, which in this instance is actually going to work in our favor. Do another one down the front here, another one at the bottom, and then another one just along this back face. Then we can just go ahead and select these vertexes and press J to join a path between them. Oops, J there. Then if we go to edge select mode, we can just select these 4 newly created edges. There, and there. Go edge and subdivide, and we'll subdivide these 3 times. And then if we go to vertex select mode, you'll see we've got 3 matching to 3 here. And just using our knife tool, we can go ahead and cut in these details. There, and then just these 2 at the bottom. And you might be thinking, you know, this is great, we've made a support loop, but we haven't resolved the issue of all those Ngons. Not to worry, after this we will go and address that and clean it all up to be a quad-based mesh. So I'm just going to go ahead and Alt-Shift and select all of these edges that are now our support loop. And if you just double tap G to do an edge slide and then press E, it'll snap to the inner edge. And we can just drag these in a bit. Cool. So that looks pretty nice. And then with that, we can just go ahead and select these edges. I'm just going to go Shift E 0.55 to crease them up. And if we enable the subdivision, we'd be able to see that better. That's looking pretty nice. Still getting some problems there. That's just because of the Ngons. And I'm actually just on this outside edge. I'm going to go Shift E -1, Shift E 0.33, just to make it a little bit less of an intense curve. Edge. Alright, so with that, let's go ahead and clean up these Ngons, as I said we would. So just to give a general rundown of what we're about to do, we're going to have a pole sit on one of the outer edges here. So I'm thinking we can do a loop there, oops, a loop through here, another loop through here, and then we can do another one there. So you see that makes nice quad-based topology and resolves quite nicely with minimal amounts of cuts. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to Control R and I'm just going to drag this down. Press J to join these together. And then I'll do another cut through here, just drag this down as well. J there. Do another cut. Just going to bring this one just to roughly line it up with this vertex here. Press J, and so there's our pole. And then just Control R and J for those ones there. And the handy thing is, these will continue down to the bottom, so we can use these same loops to join up these vertices here. And then if we focus on the ones on the side here, we can go Control R, just loop slide that up, J there, make another loop cut in the middle, connect that one up. And then similarly, if we look around the side, these ones will come around to the side part of the bevel. And we'd actually have the same up the top here since we did that earlier. And there. And then all we need is one running around the top and bottom. So I'll just add in a loop. Join that. Another pole. And then just one more loop. J on that. And then we can just go ahead and join those ones in as well. Cool. So, ignoring the monstrosity of the Ngons that we have in the middle here, we've got nice quad-based topology. Actually, speaking of what I am going to do, because if we just visualize the subdivision result on these big Ngons, sorry, just the wireframe, it doesn't look great here. It looks pretty messy. We can still get away with these Ngons because they are on flat faces. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the bottom vertexes here and just press J. And you'll see it's still not amazing, but it just cleans it up a little bit more. And just tightens everything up. So it just looks a little bit nicer. We can, like 100%, you can go ahead and clean all of that area up. To make it fully quad-based, I just don't think it's entirely worth it, in all honesty. And I'd rather focus on teaching this next part, which is going to get a little bit more complicated, nothing too outrageous, but doing some of the details on the back here. So you'll notice there's this little circular cutout here, which this one's fine because it all exists on a flat face. This one here, which you can very, very faintly see, is a little bit trickier because it actually exists within the bevels on the back vertex group, so it gets a little bit trickier. But it's okay. I will step you through how we're going to do that. Alright, so let's go ahead and first of all, let's do this little one at the back here. So what I'm going to do, just in solid face view, I'm just going to select the back and Shift H. That way we're just working with this, and then when we're working in wireframe view, we're not getting all of the other wireframes from the front pouring in. To just make it a little bit easier, I'm going to ignore the top and bottom edges, but I'm just going to go ahead and select these edges here, and then just bringing up our end panel, go to Edit, Loop Tools, and space these out. And I'm just not worrying about the top and bottom ones, just because I know from having practiced this myself that spacing these out will eventually start to cause issues with the bevel itself. So I'm just going to leave it as is to avoid any problems, but we can space these ones out on the back here without problem. Cool, and I'm just going to go ahead and re-isolate the back faces. Cool. So with this edge here, I'm just going to alt select it. I'm just going to bring it up just so it's resting against the apex of the curve there. I'm also just going to turn my subdiv off because it will just sort of make everything tank a little bit. Added an edge loop and do the same thing, just align it roughly at the apex of the curve. And if we go into vertex select mode, I'm just going to select these 4 vertices. And then press Control, Shift, and B, which will bevel our vert. And I'm just going to drag it out. I'm just going to scroll up on my scroll wheel to add 4 segments, sorry. And I'm just going to pull these all the way out until we can see the verts in the center terminate. So just around there. I think that looks fine. And then to clean this up, because this looks horrific, right? Just going to hold down Alt Shift and deselect these inner loops, and then Control X to dissolve those vertices in the middle there. And we will have a bunch of duplicate vertices or overlapping vertices in the center here, so I'm just going to select the whole mesh with A, press M, and do by distance to just clean that up. Nice. And we can just go ahead and select these middle 2 faces. We can use I to do an inset, and just bring that in to roughly match the reference image, and just do one more to create a inner support loop. And I'm just going to join these 2 verts together, and then we can select these 2 loops to create the edges that it will sit on. And then we can just go ahead and push this in. It's not a very deep sort of bit of detail, but we can just push it in a little bit there. And the outer edge is going to look absolutely horrific at the moment with the subdiv on, so we'll just leave that off for the time being. And we can clean up the topology in just a moment. Cool. What we do want to do though is just these 2 miscellaneous verts. We can just Control X to dissolve those. Cool, so I'm not going to worry about cleaning up the topology here just yet, because we're about to go make an absolute mess of it, because we're going to actually run a Boolean operation onto here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go Control R, and this will just cut a singular vert in along here. And then I'm just going to use my knife tool and using C and Z to cut a straight line that cuts the entirety of the way through the mesh. Just going to drag this up, and it's very, very faint. I'm just going to try to drag this into the middle of where I can see this little indent at the back. And then selecting this middle vert here, I'm just going to go Shift S and cursor to selected. And then Alt select this loop and Control X to dissolve it. Cool, so with our 3D cursor position there, I'm going to go Shift A and bring in a circle. And we just want to change the amount of vertices to 20. We can rotate X 90 degrees, and then let's just scale this down just so that the top and bottom vertices are roughly sitting in line. Whoops, that's not the right way to show it. Roughly sitting in line with the top and bottom here. So mine's a little bit off center, in all honesty, so I might just push this up a little bit, scale it down just a touch more. Roughly there. Not too important. Me adjusting that was probably over the top, but it's all good. Then what we'll do is we can go back to edit mode. We can just delete this half of the model. So I'm just going to delete those vertices, keep these center ones. And we'll chuck a mirror modifier onto it. And make sure to enable clipping. Back into edit mode here, and we can just drag these verts out to match up on the outer extremities of everything. We can delete these middle 2 vertices and just extrude these back in, push them along the X until they clip into the middle. With that, we'll select it, and we'll just drag it back a bit on the Y-axis. And then in edit mode, we'll just extrude all of these verts, and we'll push this extrusion back into our mesh model. And also I can just see the normals on this are all incorrect, so I'm just going to select everything, Alt-N, and flip. Push it just a little bit into the model. And the reason we're going to do this is because we're going to do a Boolean operation. So if we select the remote model here again, just going to search for a Boolean. And object, just using the eyedropper here, we're just going to select our circle. And to make the Boolean just a little bit easier to see, yeah, we can see it here, but some of it's being covered up. We'll just go to the object properties, viewport display, and we'll just make it display as bounds. Makes it easier to see where our Boolean is. Cool. So I think this is roughly in line with the way it should look, so I'm happy with that. We are going to need to apply some of our modifiers though, so just make sure you're happy with the bevel widths of the outer edges and the back, because they are the ones that we're about to apply. I'm just going to drag the subdivision to the bottom so we don't accidentally apply it, and I'm just going to hide our bevel mesh. So I'm going to assign the bevel edge and the bevel back and assign the Boolean. Cool. So now you can see our Boolean is baked into our model. I'm just going to Alt select the inner row of verts, X, and delete those vertices because we don't need them. And then we're just going to do a little bit of cleanup on the side here. So I'm going to select this edge here, or that vertex, sorry, Shift, and then M, and merge it last. And just do the same for the rest of them. Merge it last, merge it last, and merge it last. Cool. So now we've kind of cleaned up the topology at the back here. Still a bit of a mess, but nothing that we can't manage. So I'm just going to Alt select and then Alt Shift select these. I have just noticed that there are overlapping vertices in the middle here. So just with all these selected, just press M and we'll go by distance. And that's removed our two overlapping verts there. So now if we just go Alt and Alt Shift select the boundary loop, whoops. And I can just go ahead, press F, fill in a face. I'm just going to Shift H to isolate it. And I'm going to press I to do an inset. Bring it in. And it's a bit hard to see on the reference, but I've got the actual physical thing sitting in front of me. But what we're going to do is just go S and Z. Oops. S and Z. And just sort of pull this in a little bit. It's got like a little bit more of a pill shape in the middle. It's not a perfect circle for the middle section there. Just do that, and with that we can just sort of push it in a little bit as well. It's a very, very subtle bit of detail on this remote, and that's looking pretty nice. I'm going to select the outer loop as well as the inner one. I'm just going to go Shift E 0.33 because it's, as I said, very, very faint bit of detail. So let's just start to clean up a bit of the topology here, because once again, if we try to put the subdiv on, can't see any of the detail that we've just gone to all that effort of making. So we can do this pretty roughly, but it's going to work. So let's just go ahead, let's just go J between these points here. Join those together. And then at the top here, what I'm thinking, let's just go K and cut this across to round that out. And I'm going to select this vertex here, down here, and J, because that still keeps some quads at the top. It's not going to resolve perfectly, trust me, but we can do some more cleanup at the end of everything to make things easier for us. Cool. And then similarly, let's go around and I'm going to use K, C, and Z to make a cut. Do the same on this side, make a cut. And we're pretty much just going to do that all the way down to this bottom set here. So I'll just make these cuts down here so you can see where they're going to go. And then we can just do an edge cut, or edge loop, sorry. Just add these in. And then we can just use J to fill in, add the edges between these vertexes here. Just like so. And this is nice because it starts to lay out where we can sort of join in the vertexes between these two bits of detail. So you see those join in, a bit stretched, sure, but it's not too bad. And it is a flat face at the back, so I'm not too concerned about it. And with that, what I'm going to do is just go Control R to add in a loop cut. I'm just going to go SZ0 to scale it down, and then using K, C, and Z. Oops, C. I'm just going to cut left and right. It's just going to cut the loop the whole way around. Alt select, and I'm just going to drag it up. Actually, I might do an edge slide, might work better. Double tap G, do an edge slide, just pull this up. And should do the same for this, but I'm not going to alt select this because I can see that that's going to distort our bevel at the front if we do that. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to select between, let's say, here. And this side doesn't seem like it's going to matter too much, so we can just select all the way to there. And just GGE. Slide it down to just match the profile. Select this edge, Control and Shift and select between these points here. So just these 4 edges here, and do the same on the other side. Might do that one as well. And what we'll do for these is we're just going to, using loop tools, just go space. And space that out. So if we turn our subdiv back on, the middle's looking horrific, so let's just fix that up quickly just so we can see what's going on with our model. I'm going to I to insert that very quickly. But yeah, now we can see we've got that bit of detail, it's intersecting with our bevel, and it actually integrates rather nicely. So, you know, a bit complicated, but you've pulled it off. We do need to resolve what's going on in the middle here. And so let's just go ahead and alt select this inner loop here. And what we'll do is we'll go down to face and we will use grid fill here just to speed up the process of filling this all in. Let's change our span down to 6 and our offset to 2. Yours might be different. Grid fill does have a little bit of a tendency to be a bit strange sometimes, but 6 and 2 works here. If it doesn't work for you, then just muck around with the values until it provides a result that looks something like this. And I'm just going to go tab out of edit mode and look at our subdiv on it, and that looks pretty nice. Also, I have come back to record this because I didn't like the solution I initially provided, so you will see this change as it cuts back to the next scene, but just ignore it. This is a much better solution. I'm definitely being pedantic, so just ignore that. Cool, let's just go ahead and finish up the rest of the model now. Let's go J to connect these together. And we can connect these verts on the outside here as well. Oh, actually, no, what we can do instead, sorry, dissolve these, and we can cut these to the outside verts here. Just utilize all the topology that we got access to. And let's go K, C, and Z, and just start to cut these outward. Press J to join those up at the front. And we'll do the same thing just for the loops above. Let's go K, C, and Z. And I can see a little bit of a problem that's going to occur here because we're going to need to add poles in. But I don't want these poles sitting on the back face. Actually, it might work. But let's just go for safe measure. Let's go ahead and add in a loop through here. So scale Z0 again, GGE. Slide this down a bit. I'm just going to make a loop cut on the side here just to create a support loop. I'll select that, GGE and F, and just bring that into shape. And then I'm just going to select this top lot and go space, and I'll do a relax operation as well, just so it conforms more to the shape. And if we look in our subdivision, that's looking much, much nicer. But I might just go ahead and I might change these to Shift E -1, Shift E 0.33, just to soften it up a little bit more. I think that looks nice. Cool, so we're on the home stretch here. We've just got 2 more things to do. So you'll notice there's a bit of pinching on the side here. And that is a result of this edge that was brought in from our back bevel that we had earlier. So what I'm going to do, because we kind of need it to an extent, But let's just go ahead, let's just Control X to get rid of it for the time being. And because there's another bit of detail, we want to cut these little panel cuts into everything, right? Just to round out the detail that we're adding in. So we'll dissolve it, and then we'll go ahead, we'll actually make another loop cut. Seems counterintuitive, but now you'll notice it's not pinching as severely, it's more in line with the curvature. Straighten this out, because it's not going to work nicely for this little panel cut that we're trying to add in. So between this point here and this point down here, so I'll just use Control Select, I'm just going to go GGEF, just so it snaps to the back edge, which is moderately straight. Just hit Enter on that. There'll still be a little bit of distortion here, so what we're going to do is we're going to use G-stretch as a part of the loop tools. Just press that. Now, I dare say that what's happened is that you've probably pressed that, and it probably looks more like this. So if you just bring up this operations panel here, it's most likely set to spread evenly. Just change it to project, and it won't spread them out, as it did there. And then all I want to do is I'm just going to select the bottom row of verts that we didn't, well, sorry, instead of the bottom row, all the verts that we didn't just affect. And I think I've actually gone off course here. Yes, I did. And pull these all around until here. So I'm just selecting the inverse of the vertices that we selected before. And then I'm going to use G, Y, hold down Control, and snap these in line with themselves. Cool, so with that done, we can go ahead and just adjust the positions of these to make this panel cut. And you'll sort of notice that at the moment we need to move these top row vertices, and they are going to intersect with where these vertices are positioned, which is less than ideal. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to select this group here, I'm just going to go Scale Y, sort of push them in on themselves, and then I'm just going to move them on the y-axis just forward a bit, not too much because I don't want to affect the bevel at the front there, just a little bit, just like that. Cool. And so now I can go ahead, select these, and I'm going to keep that one there, so I don't want to affect this bottom one. Just going to push these forward. Now I'm going to push these well beyond where they actually need to sit, just so that I can use this as a guide for the curve, and then I can push everything back afterwards. But I might actually do it as an edge slide instead, so double tap G, just so I don't mess around with the positions of everything. Deselect this bottom one, double tap G, do a slide, bring that in, double tap G again. Actually, I'm just thinking, does it make more sense for it to sort of terminate at the top there as a curve? Yeah, no, that's right. So double tap G, slide this forward again. Cool, and then I'm just going to select all of these, and then just pull it back. Might distort things just a little bit, but for the most part it should be okay. Cool, so now I've got that general curve going along there. And just before we go ahead and bevel that, we've just got one more that we need to add in, one more panel cut. So I'm just going to bring this up to about here. I'm going to use my circle selection tool. I'm just going to double tap G. And I'm just going to roughly block out the way that this curve here looks. Double tap G again, bring that down. Cool. And so with that, what we can do is, I'm just going to Alt select this loop, Control B and do a bevel. And I'm just going to do it with one segment, or two segments technically, but just one extra loop in the middle. And we want to do that because if we go Alt and S, and press S for even thickness, I can just push it in to make that panel cut. And then if we Alt Shift select these outer edges and go Shift A 0.55, we get that nice cut going down the center there. And then we can go ahead and do the same for the outside here. So I'm just going to select this edge, Control select along here, just into the middle. And the reason I'm not selecting onto the left-hand side of the panel cut is because we're going to go ahead and just hide some topology in here that we don't really want people to see. So we'll just go Control B again. Let's bring this out just about there, let's say. And I'll show you how we're going to hide the topology, because we've got this nasty little thing going here. So we can just get rid of that. Get rid of these edges. And then I'm just going to select between these points. Actually, I might even deselect these ones on the inside here. And we'll go Alt S, S for even thickness. Just pull these in. And then I'm just going to select these two verts here. And I'm just going to use an edge slide to clean up the position just a little bit. Select the outer and inner edges. Shift E 0.55. And if we look at that, the creasing will be okay, but it's a bit problematic in the center there. So what I might do is let's just select these three M and let's go merge it last. Select this one, that one, merge it last. And if we look at that, yeah, that's a bit nicer. It's not perfect by any means, but given the fact that it's a little crevice, I think we'll be okay to get away with it. So that makes this pretty well good. The topology is a little bit of a mess at the back here. I'm not too worried about it because it will resolve nicely with the subdivision. But I'm pretty sure there's one at the front that's not connected. J to join those in. I might just do a J connection along here as well. But yeah, for the most part, like these Ngons here and these ones here, it's not too bad. I'll just show you very, very quickly because they are on flat surfaces. It's not going to cause a problem. I'm just going to apply a subdivision level of 1. See how it does resolve into quads. It may not look like, you know, super nice, but it does work. It retains good surface normals for the most part, and these are on a flat surface, so I'm not too concerned about it. There's also this one here. This one I might just clean up for the sake of edge flow, so just K, C, and Z just to cut these out. And just join these together. I do have a bit of mess here. Love. What I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to dissolve those. They can just terminate on that edge instead. Doesn't need to run the whole way through. Same as, actually, what's this one? Oh no, that one should be connected together. Well, doesn't have to be, but it's going to. And then we also have all of these at the bottom here, but it's sort of being supported by the inner bevel. I mean, we could just go ahead, just go J to close those off. And do the same off here. J there and J here. And I might just do it between these. And we could probably do it between this. I don't think it's going to cause any problems. Pretty good, apart from this mess here. I'm just going to opt to just dissolve them here. They can just resolve as an Ngon there. It's not too much of a concern. Maybe bad practice. But I mean, look, if I just show you really quickly, just apply the subdivisions. Yeah, look, that doesn't look ideal, does it? But it's on a flat surface. So, you know, if you were to get a harsh matte cap, it's not going to make any noticeable problems. And even if, you know, we go ahead, crank this up, you know, we can see that little bit of distortion there from these loops that we've got in. Actually, these aren't properly straight, so that's probably not too bad that we came back to inspect this. So let's go to scale Y0. That should fix it up. Just completely neglected to fix these ones up earlier. There you go. But yeah, sorry, back to the Ngon point. Yeah, it doesn't make any substantial difference that they're sitting there. It all looks nice and crisp. But yeah, well done on completing this model. It's looks a little bit challenging, but it's not too bad in the end, and hopefully this has taught you some decent ways of dealing with bevels and several different bevels at that.